when I'm working on this actively is Seneca said, 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
That's powerful. Welcome, friends. Kalina
and Tapis.
We're here from Eat, Read, Sleep, and we are super excited today to be talking to you about a very, very important book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey.
Yeah, so 7 Habits is one of the longest selling, I think one of the most selling of all time.
It's been around forever.
Yeah, of self-help books, productivity, inside out, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about this book. This book has been very, very inspirational for me.
Yeah, I really like that because it's been around for so long. It's still really relevant, right?
Yes.
Everything from that book are things that are, the golden staple of what can be applied to everyday world today.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about it is that what I like the concept of this is that it starts from you, independent first. So fix yourself and address things that you need to address within yourself first.
Yeah.
Then go out and above and get the community involved around that. So I love that part because a lot of times self-help books just focus on the inside part.
Yeah.
You fix yourself, but then this book kind of does it both.
That's a really great point, yeah. So the way that this book starts off is Covey introduces a paradigm, right, of perception, really. So he says that in order to change any situation in our life, we have to change our perception. In order to change our perception, we actually have to change who we are fundamentally. So that's where the 7 habits come in. And these 7 habits, if you go through them and you become accelerated at it, then you can actually help change your perception and your situation.
Right. So before we go into the 7 habits, it's broken down into 3 habits and 3 habits. So for the first 3 habits are all around going from dependent to independent.
Right. So it's almost like being, he gives an example in the book, almost like being a child, relying on your parent, and then you become independent. Right.
And then the next 3 after that are pretty much going from independent to interdependent. Right. So getting everyone else involved around you.
Yep.
So love that. So let's go with the 7 habits real quick before we start off the individual ones. First one is be proactive. Second one is begin with the end in mind. Third is put first things first. Fourth is think win-win. Fifth is seek first to understand, then be understood. 6 is synergize. And 7 is sharpen the saw. Sounds aggressive.
So let's talk about these.
All right. So the first one we're going to be proactive.
Yes. I love this one. You are in charge.
Yes.
Right?
I am a big fan of Stoicism. I read a lot of Ryan Holiday books.
Love Ryan Holiday.
And Marcus Aurelius, all those characters. So one thing that Stoicism really emphasizes, the key core of Stoicism is control what you can control. Yep. And that's kind of what be proactive means as well, is making sure that you can control what you can influence in your life. And there's other things outside of that you cannot control that are out of your concern. And unfortunately, people will focus on that part, stuff that they cannot control. Yeah. And they'll spend all their energy to get really frustrated. And that's when they become really reactive because you're waiting for the stimulus from the outside world to reel you in, versus people who know what they can control. They can be proactive and say, you know what, these are my strengths and results. These are my strengths and opportunities, and this is what I need to work on. I'm going to be proactively working towards those. I love that he goes over this first in the book.
This part was actually really eye-opening for me because he kind of breaks it down very elementary, and he says, okay, when something happens, that's the stimulus that he calls. Before you react, there's actually this gap. And within this gap, it's like this quick amount of time that you actually get to decide what you want to do. Because what happens is a lot of people think that, something happens, I respond, that's just who I am, this is how I respond to things. Right. But that's not how it works. There's actually that gap that you have to be aware of and you get to decide how you want to respond. Yeah. So that really honed in with me because I was like, all the times that I am very reactive and whatnot. Now it's easier for me to take that step back, and before I say something, do something, whatnot, I get to say, okay, is this how I want to react and respond in this situation? Yeah. It takes practice, obviously, because we're so used to just responding the way that we innately are. Yeah. But taking that step back to say, okay, is this how I want to respond is really important.
Yeah, and kind of thinking through in my career, I've started off as being a very reactive person. Yes. Right? Yeah, same. Deadlines are thrown at you last minute, and so you're just kind of waiting around for those things to come to you. And you're just like, yeah, you know what? corporate's probably going to come back and tell me I got to do this ASAP. So I'm just going to wait for that to come by. And then you kind of center your entire life around just waiting for the stimulus to come through and being reactive. Versus, I know you, when you were training me, you did a really good job of thinking proactive. And you're always like, Tapas, think long term. What is it that you want to do 3 months from now, 6 months from now? Think through what you need to do, and let's be proactively going through that. I was always very much reactive, so it's something that it's taken me a long time to learn.
Yeah.
But I think being proactive really helps you, because when those things, those negative things come in your life, or those things that divert your path, you can just pretty much say, you know what? No, this is where I'm going to stay at. This is my control. Yeah. I'm going to fix that first.
Well, thank you for that shout out. Right. But I will admit that it's not always easy being proactive, right? Being reactive is, I feel like it's innate. So it's not necessarily wrong or anything that we should think of as being bad. It's just, that's just how a lot of people are around in this world, right? When you think of people who are reactive, they say things like, oh my gosh, my boss makes me so angry, or my kids drive me crazy, or even things like, I'm too busy, I don't have time. Right? How many of us say that, myself included? So we allow ourselves to be controlled by these external factors when we really can take that step back and really decide.
So how do you try to be proactive? So I know it's something that it takes a long time, but what are some things that you do day to day? Try to make sure that you're being proactive with things.
That's a great question. So I always try to think a couple of steps ahead and plan for different scenarios. I allot a lot of time to doing different things, and then in this particular situation of how do I respond to things, it's really telling myself, giving myself that time to think through something and assess before I actually have to respond. Because I used to be like, quick. Like if someone says anything, I have to respond and do it right away. But now I'm like, okay, do I have all the facts? Am I really thinking this through? Am I looking at it through not just from my lens, but the lens from another person? And then if I do react, what would be, perceived, from the other side? So it's a lot of questions, I guess, like being curious and asking all of these questions first before really reacting and responding to something. Yeah,
I love that, because I think that's where people get tied up a lot, is they want to react to things because they think they need to just have an answer for things right away, right?
That's how this world works. We're so rushed all the time.
And a lot of times, again, you have to, what I try to do is always kind of think of mindset, is what's happening under my control? So, where I always end up in the past, what I used to struggle with was around, if it's not under my control, like my car breaks down. Oh my God, I can't believe my car
get angry,
sucks, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, you know what? The car broke down. It is what it is. Now let's think through what we need to do. What's the main goal here, right? So, again, I love what you said. Think it through first. Don't react right away. Think about what you need to do, and then proactively decide. I know Jay Shetty is huge on breathing, right? He's like, breathe. What do you do when you're stressed out? Breathe. And a lot of times that's when you can really say, okay, I'm not going to let that bother me, right? I'm not going to react to that.
What really helps me also is asking, why am I reacting this way? Like if I start to get mad, I pull myself in and say, why am I upset? So for example, with my kids, so when they start getting all riled up and crazy, and I start to lose my patience, before I snap or before I say something, I always ask myself, well, why am I actually really upset? Because if I was in a good mood, I probably would play off them and be joking and whatnot. But because I'm in a bad mood, it hits me differently. So then it's taking that step back and asking, why am I feeling this way? And then realizing that, like, the kids don't deserve for me to be angry or short or snappy at them. It's not any of their doing. It's just how I'm responding. So controlling that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, second habit is begin with the end in mind.
I love this one because you really inspired me to even think about this. Even before reading this book, you've always been the embodiment of this one, beginning with the end in mind, right? When I first read this, I automatically thought of you. I thought of Memento Mori.
Yes. Right.
Show everyone.
There.
T actually has a tattoo there of Memento Mori. We actually got that together in Miami. Hey. So, tell us about this.
Yeah. So, it's a tough concept to think about. Memento Mori, especially, is because you don't want to contemplate or think about death. So it just means remember death is literally what it means. But in general, it means that just celebrate life, enjoy what you have, because death is going to be coming. So then why wait? Why think about that and why worry about that? Just live your life.
Yeah.
Right.
So I this is hard for me to grasp because it does sound morbid initially,
yes,
right? You're
morbid.
thinking about death. You're thinking about end of life. How can you spin this around? Because I do know when I talk about this to other people, they're like, I don't want to think about death. Like that's just not.
Yeah. I mean, my wife is a good example. Whenever I go around talking about, hey, memento mori, sweetheart, she's like, no, I don't want to think about death. Why are you so morbid?
Yeah, it's a natural reaction.
It is, and it's also a very uncomfortable thing to grasp. You know, like you don't want to think about your own death and whatnot. But why I get so inspired by it is because it'll come tomorrow, 50 years, whenever it'll come. Yeah. But why am I gonna wait until that time? Whereas I can just live my life right now. I can do things that I want to do, be happy, celebrate the people around me that I want to celebrate, and just enjoy. I think that sometimes we get so lost in the day-to-day, the routines, the mundane things.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you're 60 years old, 65 years old, you know, unfortunately you might have some kind of medical condition or whatever might happen. Or, you know, I could be 40 and I get hit by a car and who knows what's going to happen. I'm not waiting for that moment to self-reflect. I'm going to just live my life the way it is now.
You know what's kind of sad is, at least for me personally, and I see it a lot in those around me, is when something bad happens to someone that we love, we always think like, oh man, like this is my reminder in life to not take anything for granted. So it's a reminder that, hey, we got to take a step back. But then we do that, at least for myself, for like a week or two, and then I kind of slip back and gradually again get lost into the chaos of the world, and I forget that, right? So this is really just that reminder. Like, we don't need something tragic to happen to remind us every day, and we shouldn't wait until something like that happens. Every day we should remember that, hey, you know, if you only have today to live, are you making the most of it? Are you making the best of your time with everyone around you? And are you happy today? Like every day you should be the happiest that you could be.
Yeah. And, you know, the reminder part is important because, like, you know, in the office, I have a little thing up there that says memento mori. I'm always remembering it. I mean, I have it tattooed on my head.
Yeah.
So like sometimes when I get stressed out, I literally will just go like this to kind of remind myself, like, hey, don't get stressed out. This is not what it's all about.
Yeah.
And just kind of a constant reminder. And one thing in the book that he mentioned, and I think we'll cover it in our summary as well, is think about what people will say at your funeral. So if this, I know memento mori is a very morbid concept, but if you want to take it one step further, and I've done this in the past, and it's really eye-opening, and it's write your own eulogy, right? Yeah. So like, I did that, and as I was writing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to think of it as the perspective of my daughter. What would my daughter think of me if I was to pass away? And what I ended up finding out was like, my dad worked a lot. My dad spent a lot of time doing this. My dad and I, we went once in a while to the park, and when my dad played with me, it was a lot of fun, but it was not all the time. Yeah. And when you do that, you just kind of, I just sat back. And again, this is just me thinking through what my daughter would say about me. And it's not to kind of put myself down. It kind of opened my eyes and saying, wow, I'm not prioritizing the right things in my life and not thinking with that end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It really just allows you to see things from a different perspective, right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Really, really love this one because it's just not just for work, but for our everyday life. Like, we just have to take advantage of the day that we have and live it to its fullest.
Yep. All right, habit 3. Now, this is something that you are really good with, and that's put first things first.
Love this one, you guys. I'm such a type A personality. So, but first things first is really, this part is cool because Covey gives us this table, and I think many of us have seen it in one form or another. In his book, he calls it the management matrix, but I think there are others out there that have created it. It's like the time management quadrant or whatnot. It's been called a couple of different things. But essentially, if you picture a box of 4, and there's 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he breaks it down to urgent and important activities, things that are not urgent but important, and then vice versa, things that are urgent and not important, and then not urgent or not important at all, right? All of those things. He puts it in, and what he says is anytime you have an activity, anything that you have in your life, plot them in the box, and where does this box go? And it really gives you that perspective of like, man, I'm, at least for me, I'm spending a lot of time on things that are really urgent but not important at all, right? How many times do we see that at work where there's all these fire drills and things that we're supposed to do, but if you take a step back, it's like, is it really that important? And do I have to do it? I think that's the key part right there.
Yes.
So what I've really learned from this is, and Covey says it too, anything that's in your quadrant 3 box, which is the urgent but not really important, this is where you should be delegating out a lot of stuff and where you should learn to say no.
Right.
Learn to say no. And what I've actually realized is this, being able to delegate out my work and learning when to say no actually has strengthened the relationships that I have with my colleagues. So when I have a team, and you know, I'm really big on development, on helping people grow. And, you know, when I'm delegating, it's not really just telling someone, hey, do this or do that, right? I'm not having someone do bitch work for me.
Right.
It's really helping them understand how can this task develop them, how can they learn from this, how can they grow from this, and then I work together with them. So I'm spending time actually in quadrant 2 developing, building relationships, but at the same time getting quadrant 3 taken care of by having someone else do the work for me. And so this is the staple of how I work, how I lead my teams, and I feel very fulfilled because I get to do the high level stuff, the stuff that I really love, building the relationships, while not having to do all the little stuff.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that he mentions in the book, and I think you just said right now as well, is a lot of people spend time on box 3, right? The urgent but not important stuff. And what I love that you said was delegating a task to others, right? I know this is something that you've thrown back at me a lot of times whenever I call you and I say, hey, I'm so stressed out about this. Why are we doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, who in your team is going to benefit from doing this task? So it's not about just handing it off to somebody else. It's more about like, hey, this person is developing. It would be really cool for them to do this because it'll give them that training they need.
And the trust too.
And the trust, but there will be tasks which you probably put in box 1, which is urgent and important, and you'll just do yourself. You're not gonna get involved because it's not gonna necessarily benefit their development. But I love that whenever you would remind me, like, who, you know, you could probably hand this off to this person over here. This will give them a great insight, good training lesson from there.
So let's be real. Why do you not delegate out?
So I am,
because it's hard,
yes,
right? Like there's a lot of people, you know, we can say, oh, delegate, tell other people what to do, but it's not an easy thing to do.
I was a very reactive person.
Okay.
And also because I had that mindset, which is the only way it's going to get done right is going to be is if I do it. So it was a matter of not trusting someone else to carry out my vision. And also just not also feel like I can delegate it because, you know what, it's not going to get done right. I'm going to eventually have to take care of myself because this person's not going to do it.
You know what really helped me with that? Once I realized that if it's done wrong, it's not a reflection of me as a person. Because what I was worried about was if it was done wrong, then I looked bad because the work wasn't getting done because someone else was doing it. But once I was able to let go of that, and it's not that I looked bad, it's that I actually cared enough to let someone else learn through making mistakes or through trial and error. That actually made me feel better. So in essence, I actually wanted the task to not necessarily always go right because I wanted it to be a learning opportunity for someone else that we can talk through and actually use as a development tool for them.
That's true. And in people who live on box 1,
yes, so those are like fire drills all the time.
Everything's a fire drill.
So box 1 is urgent and important. All the time.
And these are the people that, if you live in box 1, your life is stressful.
Oh yeah.
Everything is right now.
Sirens
everything is
all the time.
and that's where a lot of people end up also, you know, struggling with the stress, and mental health also takes a toll because you're just on the, you know, I gotta get caffeine, I gotta do this right away, and you're just on that constant pace, which is in the long term not possible and leads to burnout.
So the important part of this is that quadrant 2 is the most crucial quadrant. So how do we all spend most of our time there? So quadrant 2 are things that you do to help. Quadrant 2 is important, but not urgent, right? So it's things like building relationships, things like focusing on your own lifestyle, things like your own growth and development, journaling, things, planning, right? Things that help you. But we don't necessarily do it because, like masochists, I feel like most of us put others' needs before ours, and then we just don't take care of ourselves.
Agreed, yeah. Like working out, eating healthy, those are all in quadrant 2. And we really need to spend more time there. Prioritize that first. Wake up early in the morning, work out, have a good diet for the rest of the day. Then you conquer your day. You'll feel much better, and you're prioritizing that. And then you start to delegate tasks to people who will improve from it.
Yeah.
And then quadrant 4 is the one you want to avoid at all costs. But
quadrant 4 is what?
That is the not important and not urgent.
TikTok, Instagram.
Yes, and unfortunately,
Netflix.
I won't show you, but my screen time is so bad with the quadrant 4 stuff. So Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, all that kind of stuff, like you said. How do we get out of not going into quadrant 4?
So I think it's a mindset, because at least for me, what I think about is I rationalize quadrant 4. I say like, oh, I spent so much time today on 1, 2, and 3. I need to just vegetate and do nothing and not think, and like just let my brain settle. And when you tell yourself that that's what you need, obviously that's what you're going to follow through. But it's that going back to habit 1, being in control. How are you going to use that gap to respond in this moment and say, okay, well, in this time I could either scroll through TikTok, or I can sleep early and rest. I can read a couple pages in a book, or whatever it is that floats your boat, right? Like whatever you want to do, you can work out, do a couple of sit-ups. But it's really making that decision what you want to do and what you want to believe, because it's all a mindset at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think, some of the stuff like TikTok, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, you could allot them. You could give them the time, right?
Yeah.
What I try to do is I'll put an hour of YouTube, but when I'm on YouTube, that's me learning.
You're watching us during that hour,
yeah. Besides watching Eat, Read, Sleep,
subscribe to Eat, Read, Sleep.
I'm also going through how to better myself, right? So I'm going through a lot of good other books that might be interesting for us.
Yeah. So killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Right. Yeah. Or I'm trying to learn how to do video editing, all that kind of stuff. So maybe I'm just watching other people show me how to better myself. So it's an act of self-improvement, and you're using it for the better.
I'm going to also throw it out there. Last week, we went over the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And that book goes through how to break bad habits as well. So that's a lot of tactics from there that you can throw in here. How to make quadrant 4 activities, impossible or unattractive or just really hard to do, so that you can get rid of it from your life.
Exactly. 100% agreed. Habit 4 is think win-win.
Win-win.
So pretty much this is you win, I win, we all win, T-Pain wins, everyone wins, right?
All I do is win. Right, is that the song?
That's the song, yep. We're definitely aging ourselves with that song, by the way.
That's okay. I'm good. I'm proud of my age.
But there's 6 paradigms in the win-win category, right? First one is win-win, we all win, everyone's happy, right? There's a win-lose. Of course, that's I win, you lose. Lose-win, this is somebody who is...
I didn't know what this was first when he said that.
Yeah.
So lose-win is someone that's like really passive. They're like, oh, you win. I'm a loser. I suck.
I'll be honest. I was sometimes in the lose-win category because there are times where back to work, I'll get some feedback from my boss. Hey, this is not going right in what you're doing. And where I should be trying to help my team improve them, I would just take all that, internalize it, and then my team wins because they don't get the feedback that they need to improve. I'm just going to take that. So I lost in that in my boss's eyes, and my team wins because they're not getting the feedback they needed, and they're going to continue to do whatever they did not need to do.
Yep.
So I sometimes do fall under the lose-win. I'll be honest, and I know we wrote in there loser, passive. I was very passive, but now I feel much more comfortable giving the feedback.
And as we're going through these 6 ways, he calls it the paradigm of human interaction, but it's essentially like the 6 ways of winning or losing that people see it. There's no right or wrong, right? I mean, there is a more preferred, but it doesn't mean that it's bad if you're this way or the other. It's recognizing that this is how you respond to it, and then how do you elevate up to that win-win mentality.
Right. Then after that is the lose-lose, where nobody wins.
Everyone's a loser.
And then we have just the win, which is somebody who's really selfish. I just want to win. I don't care about what happens to anybody else.
I laugh because I can imagine a couple of people like this where they're just like heads down and just focus on themselves. And as long as they win, like that's all that matters.
Yeah. Yep. And the last one is win-win or no deal. So it's either we both win or everything is chalked. Nothing matters.
So initially, I thought this was actually a good type of way of looking at it. Like, hey, let's make sure we all win. But then the more I read it and understood it, this is probably one of the worst ones.
Yeah.
Because it's like we either all win or I'm taking you down with me. We are all
Yes.
losers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So lots of ways to think about it. And so Covey really just says like, hey, the best way is to go for we all win, we're all number one, because he brings up that abundance mentality that there is enough for everyone, right? There's enough space for everyone to win. There's enough for everyone to be enriched and benefit from winning together.
Yep.
Why is this so hard? Why is this a habit that we actively have to work on?
Because I think a lot of people struggle with they struggle with the mindset.
Right.
That I guess it's been ingrained into us for a very long time that there's a winner or there's a loser.
Yeah.
There's nothing else in between.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as everybody wins. No one has equal size of pie. You get the whole pie and nothing else, right? So I think that's the mentality that we come from, and unfortunately, we carry that on through our entire life. So anything we do, right? Anything we do is like, you know what? I'm gonna win. I'll be the best at this, and I'm gonna show everybody else that I'm way better than them, and they're all gonna lose.
First place or no place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but how do we adopt a win-win mentality? How would you do that with your team?
So Covey does say in there's a phrase, to go for win-win, you not only have to be nice, you have to be courageous.
Yes.
And I think for me, it's really standing up against the grain and really showing everyone that we can all win, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to stand up and say, like, let's all win, because everyone's going to be out to get another person, right? It sounds kind of cutthroat, but I've seen it a little bit in where we work. I'm sure it's across the board for all workplaces that there's always people that are kind of out to get you, but you have to be brave enough to stand up and say no. Like, that's not the only way to win. We have to be able to win together, and you have to, unfortunately, like, you have to be patient and take the time to show the benefits of everyone winning together.
Right.
And I can share it's very what is the word? It's hard to do, but it's also not very encouraging as you're going through it, because like you said, this is what our society really is used to. You have to really stand up against all of this and be that advocate for win-win, for everyone to win.
Yeah. Isn't it you have to keep top of mind at all times? And I think it also kind of goes back to being proactive, right? So making sure that that's a priority you make, is like, whatever I do, I want to make sure that everybody around me is going to be winning with me, and not just me trying to be the best version. And and like you said, a lot of times in workplaces, there's employee of the month, right? Best of the best, but we should really think about, like, how can we make sure that we're not just involved in employee of the month, but have a team of the month. Everybody's winning at the same time.
Yeah, I like that.
Not just saying, hey, this person was the best of the best. Right.
Recognizing teamwork and the efforts putting into it versus that person or the metric or the number or the result that came with it, right? Looking at the overall whole picture.
Agreed.
So it's just that whole mental shift of looking at things a little bit differently. That's where it's different, right? And this is hard because, again, Covey goes through that being independent to interdependent. And this is just another way of looking at things now, like as a society, how do we all win?
Yeah, agreed. All right. And then habit 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. I know you're laughing because this is something
that's so hard for me. I'm going to be vulnerable here and share. So seek first to understand, right? So he talks about, okay, in order to understand someone, you actually have to listen to them, right? Communication is such an important skill set, probably the most important skill set. And we spend so much of our time reading, writing, talking, speaking to each other. But how much time do we actually spend listening, right? It's not actually something that we practice doing. Like growing up in school, you practice writing or you practice speech and public speaking, but no one ever just says, okay, let's sit and practice listening. So for me, you know how I love to multitask, right? Like I
right.
tell my team, my motto, you guys, is if you're only doing one thing, you're doing nothing.
Right.
And in hindsight, I know that's a really bad way to say things. That's definitely not living in the moment, because you're always just doing two things or multiple things at once. But that's how I've always worked, is like, I can't just do one thing. I have to do, I was telling you a story the other day about brushing my teeth, right? I can't just brush my teeth. I have to brush my teeth and do squats and get my tea ready.
Totally weird. Totally
walk
weird.
around, because doing just one thing like gives me anxiety. So, when I have a conversation with someone, it's my natural go-to to also do something else at the same time. Scrolling through my phone, composing an email, or when I'm in a meeting and we're on a WebEx and I'm trying to listen to someone, but I'm also doing something else at the same time. So I am actively learning how to just drop everything. Like when someone's talking, okay, set everything aside, really look them in the eye and listen to their words. It's really hard for me because I also, as people are talking, I plan on what I'm going to be saying next. And I think, hopefully, that's not just me. I think a lot of people do that. They're always thinking, what I'm going to say next. And so now I actually realize that if you stop to truly listen to the person, you actually understand more of what they're saying. And what you say, what I say in response is much more effective than what I was planning to say in my head.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of that as well, where I'm just trying to think of the rebuttal,
that makes me feel better.
Right? Like I'm talking to a colleague and I'm already thinking like, okay, I know what to say next, because he or she's not on the same path that I want to be on with them. So I'm just like, okay.
You're trying to control the situation.
Right. But you completely miss the entire part, like where the person said, I am struggling with this, and this. I didn't get proper training that. You just ignore the entire part. Yeah. At least I do. Yep. And then you're just like, you still didn't do a task. It's like, it's one of those things.
And what does that do? That invalidates their feelings, right? That makes them feel not heard, and that doesn't make them feel good.
Yeah, and they'll just think that, oh, like my boss just wants me to do whatever he tells me to do, and that's it.
Yep. So you have to seek first to understand. So you really have to understand where this other person is coming from, and that has a lot to do with empathy.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for a lot of people. Just understanding where this other person's coming from, why they feel a certain way, instead of just having excuses for everything.
Yep.
Once you can get through that, then it's the then to be understood.
Yep. Yeah. One thing that I always kind of go back to when I'm trying to work on this actively is Seneca said, 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
That's powerful.
Think about it. You have 2 ears for a reason. Think, listen first, then speak. And then it kind of goes exactly with what Covey says in the book too, right? You got to make sure you understand first, listen first, and then you speak your mind. Make sure you're being understood.
Yeah.
So I always try to just think about that. Like when someone's talking to me, I'll say, you know what, I have 2 ears for a reason.
I love that.
2 big ears, might add you, but 2 ears for a reason, and 1 mouth, right? So, and in the book, he also has he goes into a lot around the different types of listening. So I definitely recommend you guys go through it too, because there's a lot of good examples on there on how to become a more empathetic listener, right?
Yeah. This book is really hard to summarize and try to do a quick podcast in, because there's just so much great content.
There is.
He goes through so many examples that relates a lot of people from all different scenarios. There's a lot of research, and there's just everything. So if you guys are listening today, thank you very much. But we also do recommend you pick up the book, because there's just so much in here that we could not cover.
100% agreed. So the last part of Habit 5 is be understood.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
So, it kind of ties in together, right? So you have to first have to understand in order for them to understand you. So you build that relationship, you listen to the other person, and once you gain their trust and you build that relationship, then whatever it is that you need to say or share, it's much easier understood by the other person. You have a clearer presentation, you earn their trust, and then therefore whatever it is that you want to say can be understood.
Yeah, good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times to convey our message and to kind of rally the groups, you have to make sure that we understand their perspective, but then also when we introduce ours, they're not just going to dismiss us as well, right?
Exactly.
So that's where the importance of listening to what they're saying.
I think a lot of people, what they think is it's more important to prove their point, right? Yeah. To paint the picture of this is why you should believe A, B, C, D, or trust in me. But it usually goes off of that, almost like a feeling, that gut feeling of like, do I trust this person, and is what they're saying valuable? Because, you know, even with UT, like, we have such a strong relationship that even if you said something to me that I knew wasn't right, I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, I believe you. Like,
right.
Because you have that trust, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to prove your point and go through all of these things. Like, it's that relationship. I understand you, you understand me, and we have that trust and bond.
Second last habit, habit 6 is synergize. So
it is the last of the interdependence.
Yes, that's true. That's what I was thinking of. That's what I was thinking of.
So synergize, what does that mean?
So 2 minds are greater than one, right? So pretty much making sure you're working with each other.
Really dating ourselves now, right?
Yeah,
Can you name that tune?
I cannot.
That's Spice Girls, When Two Become One.
All I know of that song is Wannabe. That's the only Spice Girls that song.
I'm not even gonna try that. Okay.
I was gonna let you just go off of that,
Okay.
but synergize, right? Okay. So pretty much making sure that whatever you do, when you all work together, the benefit comes from that working together. You have different ideas, you have different perspective that you put into mind to build it. Right? One great example of this that I thought about when I first saw this again was what we're doing now, right? The podcast.
Okay.
Right. So we both had an itch to do something more creative, to do something, where we wanted to put something out into the world. And we were trying to do something individually, probably in our minds, we were probably trying to do something individually. But when we actually sat down and said, hey, let's just do this together. Let's make the podcast. Yeah. Let's do this. And together we synergized to make this into where it is now. That's the power of it, right?
I think the greatest power is we both come to the table bringing our own different qualities of strengths and opportunities as well. We can fill in the gaps for each other, and then we can also enhance the gaps for each other. Yeah, our strengths, enhance our strengths for each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the first example I always think of whenever we think of synergy is kind of what we're doing now.
Yeah.
All right, and then the last habit is sharpen the saw.
Yes. So I really like this one because he shares a picture that I think of all the time. I've read this book many years ago, and then we also did another quick recap of it recently through work. Mm-hmm. And this is a story where, imagining you walk up and you're in the forest and you see this man, he's feverishly sawing this tree down, and you ask him like, oh, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm sawing this tree. I've been at this for 5 hours. And you say, hey, why don't you take a break to sharpen the saw? You could probably do it much faster. Mm-hmm. And he says, I don't have time to take a break. I'm sawing the tree. And, that really rang true with me with how many times I've done in my life, because I always just like go, 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 like to the point where I don't even eat lunch. I'll work like 12-hour days straight and not even take a break to rest.
Yeah, I think a lot of people fall into that trap of it, right? Because there's that also the hustle culture, right? You have to be on the go. You have to keep going nonstop. Versus where if you just took the time to retool, be more efficient with things. That's kind of what I think Covey was trying to get at is if you sharpen the saw, you probably will get done with the tree a lot quicker.
Exactly.
Because even though you might spend a lot of time sharpening the saw, but it's gonna be a lot more sharper to get through it.
It's an investment. Exactly. That people don't usually see.
So you have to really kind of set that time up, right? And this can go back to everyone sitting down and writing through where did they need to sharpen the saw? Where do they need to go back and reflect and think about their efficiency, their productivity, day-to-day life, because there are things in our life that I feel like we all do that are just because we think we have to do, and it's not efficient. We could be doing it a lot better.
Yeah. So when we relate it to ourselves, it's sharpening the saw for us, right? Mm-hmm. So it breaks it down. Covey breaks it down to 4 key fundamentals, and it's your spiritual, your mental, your social emotional, and your physical, right? So those are the 4 things that he says, hey, you need to take a moment, make sure you spend time on those 4 things in order for you to be able to propel and do everything else within the book.
Yep. So I'm going to put you on the spot here.
All right, let's do it.
Which of those 4 are you actively working on to sharpen?
Actually, all of them, to be honest with you.
Should take the easy way out.
Physical, for sure. I have recently, within the past 6 months, taken a really strong affinity towards bouldering, rock climbing, and I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you why. Not only is it really great physical endurance, but for me, it's a lot of mental and emotional release as well. It's very much so a like a personal challenge for me. Every time I'm climbing, I'm really much so in the moment. That kind of ties in with my spirituality of what I'm trying to attain in my own personal peace, and it's really that time for me to do me and do what makes me happy. So,
like that. I think I agree with you there. I think physical for me is super important. So, getting back to working out, getting back to eating properly, I think and being more active in my life, right? I think that's been super important for me. Because when work gets tough, all that again, that's box 2. I set that aside and go back to just the box 1, box 3, which is the important, urgent stuff, or not important but urgent stuff, right? Yeah. So I have to constantly think, okay, now I'm gonna make sure I focus on my physical part of it. And another part that I'm really focusing on recently is spirituality. And for me, that's a lot of meditation and journaling. So for me, journaling has become a form of meditation just because now I'm able to sit there and just write out how my day is going, what are my thoughts, or I have prompts that I use to kind of go through, and that kind of gives me the time, allows me the time to do it. But it's been super helpful because it really kind of slows everything down. Yeah. And versus that, the time that I normally would be spent journaling, if I was not journaling, would be emails, the day-to-day stuff for work. Yeah. Again, not important, not urgent stuff.
And that it just puts everything in perspective. What we thought was really important, all the quadrant 3 stuff, once you stop doing it, you realize the world doesn't stop. Right. It still keeps going. Everything's okay, and you benefited because you spent time on yourself in quadrant 2 stuff, doing things to take care of you, your spiritual, mental, physical, whatnot, and you thrive from it. So the more you let go of quadrant 3, the more you grow and you feel better. But it's just that first step that's really hard. Yeah,
super impactful. So this book, amazing book, guys, and it's
a staple for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, what I love the most about this book is that it goes through both parts of it, which is the individual self-improvement part, and then also bringing that out to the world and getting everybody else involved in your success too, to make everybody around you thrive. I love that book because that you do not see in many self-help books, because a lot of that is again focused around individual, and it's probably why this book is so popular, because it has both of the thought processes.
Because it's very important to impact your environment, right? Because otherwise, if you're just doing you, but everything else in your environment, everyone else is kind of just the same status quo as before. It's really hard. It's really easy to revert back to the way that it was before. Hard to maintain the type of person you're trying to grow. Yeah.
So definitely recommend it, guys, to pick up this book. If you don't have the time, I definitely recommend it on Audible. Like we mentioned last time in our summaries, we
1.8 that.
1.8. I'm a 1.2 still. But definitely check it out.
Thank you guys for tuning in to Eat, Read, Sleep today as we go through 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. Make sure you hit subscribe. We'll see you soon.